Hejner memes is SPX is that صرت سبانية ما أنا حبيبي صار في أنا واحد أنا حاسس. Oh, you got notes and all that?
Yeah.
Well, we have to get it right, don't we? Gives me the paper to doodle on. Or is it all notes?
It's all notes.
Oh, okay.
How many would you like?
Oh, when you get through the first one, I'll have it. Thank you. Okay. Don't be shy.
No, I'm not. I just...
Well, shall we start?
Are you pleased with the album?
Yes. This from the top. Of course I'm pleased with it, huh? You know.
What do you think of it?
I think it's the best thing I've ever done.
The word is out. John Lennon and Yoko Ono are back in the studio.
Oh, really? From where?
In the studio.
Oh.
Recording again for the first time since 1975, when they vanished from public view.
Ooh.
What have you been doing?
Do you want to start or should I start?
You should start.
Oh, I should. Really? Okay.
On this album, there's like practically no imagery at all.
No. Because, there was none in my head. There's no hallucinations.
There's no newspaper taxis.
I was consciously writing poetry there. And that's self-conscious poetry. The poetry on this album is superior to anything I've done because it's not self-conscious in that way. I've tried, had least trouble writing the songs of all time, you know.
There's no bullshit.
Yeah, no bullshit.
It's hard to misinterpret the songs you're doing now.
Well, I'm not interested in creating illusion. Plastic Ono was simple and straight. That is what I'm trying to do. Now, I'm always trying to do that. Because of my hang-ups and many other things, I'll only now and then specifically write about me. But now I wrote all about me. That's why I like it. It's me and nobody else. So I like it, you know.
So you can like, basically, the honesty of it is...
No, just that it's real, you know. It's about me, and I don't know about anything else, really. I was awake all my life. Do you understand? I've always been all my life.
Well before the Beatles?
You can't isolate things like that. It's like the constant search for why you go down one road and why you go down another. It has as much to do with being from Liverpool or being from Quarrybank Grammar School or being in a household where the library was full of Oscar Wilde and Whistler and Fitzgerald and all the Book of the Month Club stuff my auntie had, you know, and her taking in students when my uncle died and therefore being exposed to 18-year-old intelligent minds who were becoming vets and chemists and all that, and you know, and me being a young boy surrounded by this, which influences more? It's you and your ilk, you know, the Beatle watchers. I use that in a friendly way. The Beatle watchers who are so hung up on Beatles. It always comes off like I'm attacking the Beatles, but I'm saying the Beatles were important. But in my life, you know, the Beatles' influence, was it more important than my birth? In my education? The fact that my parents split and I lived with my auntie? I cannot give that more important emphasis than any other part of my life. I came out the sticks. I didn't hear about anything other than... Van Gogh was the most far-out thing I'd ever heard of. And even London was something we used to dream of. And London's nothing, you know. and Paris and all this. It was all that, you know. I came out the fucking sticks to take over the fucking world, it seemed like to me. And I was enjoying it, and I was in it, and I was trapped in it too. My childhood was not all suffering. It was not all slum. I was always well-dressed, well-fed, and well-schooled, and brought up to be a nice, lower-middle-class English boy. That's what made the Beatles different. The fact that George, Paul, and John were grammar school boys. Up till then, all rock and rollers had basically been black and poor, rural South, you know, whatever. City slums, and all the whites had been truckers, like Elvis. Buddy Holly was apparently more of our ilk, you know. A bit of a suburban boy who had learned to read and write and knew a little more. But the so-called thing of the Beatles was the fact that we were pretty well educated, you know, and not truckers. You know, Paul could have gone to university. He was always a good boy. He passed his exams. He could have become, what the hell, I don't know, Dr. McCartney, I suppose. I could have done it myself if I'd worked, but I never worked.
Dr. Lennon?
Well, I could have taken up fine arts or languages, that kind of stuff. The arts I know I could have handled easily. It just was never encouraged.
What are your personal tastes on
Wop Wopaluma. You know? I mean, I like rock and roll, man. I don't like much else.
Do you have your own musical preferences these days?
Well, I like all music, depending on what time of day it is.
What do you think of the rock and roll scene today?
I don't know what it is, you know. You'd have to name it. I don't think there's...
Do you get any pleasure out of the top 10? Do you listen?
No, I never listen. Only when I'm recording or about to bring something out and I'll listen. Just before I record, I go buy a few albums just to see what people are doing. If they improved any or what. Has anything happened?
Right.
And nothing's really happened, you know. There's a lot of great guitarists and musicians around, but nothing's happening, you know.
John, what's your opinion of the newer waves?
I love all this punky stuff. It's pure, you know. I'm not, however, crazy about the people who destroy themselves.
You disagree with Neil Young, that lyric in Rust Never Sleeps? It's better to burn out than to fade away.
I hate it. It's better to fade away like an old soldier than it is to burn out. You know, I don't appreciate the worship of dead Sid Vicious or, you know, dead James Dean or dead John Wayne. It's the same thing, you know, making Sid Vicious a hero. Jim Morrison, you know, it's garbage to me. I worship the people who survive. Gloria Swanson, Greta Garbo, and they're saying John Wayne conquered cancer. He whipped it like a man, and I'm sorry that he died and all that. I'm sorry for his family. You know, he didn't whip cancer, it whipped him. You know, I don't want Sean worshipping John Wayne or Johnny Rotten or Sid Vicious, because what do they teach you? Nothing. Death.
Why do you think it means so much to people?
Rock and roll?
Yeah.
Because it's primitive enough and has no bullshit, really. The best stuff. And it gets through to you. It's beat, you know. I mean, go to the jungle, they have the rhythm, and it goes throughout the world, and it's as simple as that. You get the rhythm going, everybody gets into it. I think, Michael X's, he said it, but I read that Eldridge Cleaver said it. Somebody said it, that rock, the blacks gave the whites, the middle-class whites, back their bodies,
right,
and put their minds and bodies together. Something like that, you know. Rock and roll only came into our consciousness when white people did it. You know, I think it was a euphemism for fucking. The actual expression meaning being in bed and rocking and rolling. So this bit about when did rock start really means when did the honkies start noticing it? When did we know it was something strong and powerful and beautiful?
You know, we've all been mates for quite a long time, so we don't get on each other's nerves as much as we could.
I had a group. I was the singer and the leader. I made a decision whether to have him in the group or not. Was it better to have a guy who was better than the people I had in, obviously, or not? And that decision was to let Paul in to make the group stronger. Well, from that, Paul introduced me to George, and Paul and I had to make a decision. Well, I had to make a decision whether to let George in. I listened to George play. I said, play raunchy, or whatever the old story is, and I let him in. I said, okay, you come in. And that was the three of us then, and the rest of the group was thrown out gradually. And it just happened like that, you know. Instead of going for the individual thing, we went for the strongest format and for equals. George's relationship with me was one of young follower, an older guy. He's 3 or 4 years younger than me. George is 10 years younger than me or some shit like that. I couldn't be bothered with him when he first came around. He used to follow me around like a bloody kid, hanging around all the time. I couldn't be bothered. He was a kid who played guitar, and he was a friend of Paul's, which made it all easier. But it took me years to come around to him, start considering him as an equal or anything. It's a love-hate relationship. And I think George still bears some resentment towards me for being a daddy who left home. He would not agree with this, but that's my feeling. You know, I was just hurt. I was just left out as if I didn't exist. And, you know, I don't want to be that egomaniacal, but he was like a disciple of mine when we started. In spite of all the things that the Beatles really could play music together when they weren't uptight. And if I get a thing going, Ringo knows where to go, you know. Like that. Ringo was a star in his own right in Liverpool before we even met. Ringo was a professional drummer who sang and performed and was in one of the top groups in Britain, but especially in Liverpool. So, Ringo's talent would have come out one way or the other, you know. I don't know what he would have ended up as, you know. Whatever that spark is in Ringo, we all know what it is, but we can't put our finger on it. Whether it's acting or drumming or singing, I don't know. There's something in him that is projectable, and he would have surfaced as an individual.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
This is interesting, because in the early days in England, all the groups were like Elvis and a backing group. And the Beatles deliberately didn't move like Elvis. That was our policy, because we found it stupid and bullshit. And then Mick Jagger came out and resurrected bullshit movement, you know, wiggling your ass and that. So then people began to say, well, the Beatles are passe because they don't move. But we did it as an intellectual, you know. When we were younger, we used to move. We used to jump around and do all the things that they're doing now, coming on stage with toilet seats and shitting and pissing. That's what we were doing in Hamburg, you know, and smashing things up. It wasn't a thing that Pete Townsend sort of worked out. It's something you do when you play 6 or 7 hours. There's nothing else to do. You smash the place up and you insult everybody. When the Beatles were depressed, thinking that the group was going nowhere and this is a shitty deal and we're in a shitty dressing room, I'd say, where are we going, fellas? And they go, to the top, Johnny. And I'd say, where's that, fellas? And they say, to the toppermost of the poppermost. And I'd say, right. And we'd all sort of cheer up. As soon as we made it, but the edges were knocked off. You know, Brian put us in suits and all that, and we made it very, very big, but we sold out, you know. The music was dead before we even went on the theatre tour of Britain. And we were feeling shit already because we had to reduce an hour, 2 hours playing, which we were glad in one way, to 20 minutes, and go and repeat the same 20 minutes every night. The Beatles' music died then as musicians. And that's why we never improved, you know, as musicians. We killed ourselves then to make it. And that was the end of it. And George and I are more inclined to say that, you know. We always missed the club days because that's when we were playing music. When the Beatles played in America for the first time, they were already old hands, you know. It was pure craftsmanship. The jism had gone out of the performance a long, long time ago.
Why do you think the impact of the Beatles was so much bigger in America than it was in England?
The same as American stars are so much bigger in England, that's what I guess.
Greener grass.
Grass is greener, and we really were professional by the time we got here. We learnt the whole game, you know. When we arrived here, we knew how to handle press. The British press are the toughest in the world. We could handle anything, you know. We were all right. I know on the plane over, I was thinking, you know, oh, we won't make it, or I said it on a film somewhere, you know. But that's the side that's that side, you know. We knew we would wipe them out if we could just get a grip on you. We'd already done half the world, England and Europe. And by the time we got to America, it didn't have the guts, you know. And we were already out of creative performing by then. Only the excitement of the American kids, the American scene, made it come alive. It was a show we knew like that.
When did you first start getting looked at the reactions from people who listened to the records for sort of spiritual.
This record. Oh, the
Right.
Beatles. There's a guy in England called William Mann who writes in the Times and wrote the first intellectual review of the Beatles, which got people talking about us in that intellectual way.
As musicians?
Yeah, and he wrote about Aeolian cadences and all sort of musical terms, and he is a bullshitter,
Did you put Aeolian cadences in It Won't Be Long?
To this day, I don't have any idea what they are. They sound like exotic birds.
How would you describe Beatle music?
Oh, Beatle music. Well, it means a lot of things to me, because there's not one thing that's Beatle music, because how can I? I'm part of it. What is Beatle music? Walrus? Or Penny Lane? The early stuff, the Hard Day's Night period, I call it, was the sexual equivalent of the beginning hysteria of a relationship. And the Sgt. Pepper Abbey Road period was the mature part of the relationship, Maybe, had we gone on together, maybe something interesting would have come of it, but it wouldn't have been the same. But maybe it was a marriage that had to end.
When did your songwriting partnership with Paul end?
That ended, I don't know, around 1962 or something. I don't know. I mean, if you give me the albums, I can tell you exactly who wrote what, and which line. I mean, we sometimes wrote together and sometimes didn't. But all our best work, apart from the early days, like I Wanna Hold Your Hand, we wrote together and things like that, we wrote apart, always. We did no but One After 909 on the What's It LP. It's one I wrote when I was 17 or 18 in Liverpool, separately from Paul. Some of his I thought, I don't know, the sun is fading away and things like that were things. Paul wrote those. We always wrote separately, but we wrote together because we enjoyed it a lot sometimes, and also because they'd say, well, you're going to make an album. So we'd get together and knock off a few songs, just like a job.
You didn't compose most of your stuff separately, as other accounts have said?
No. I said that, but I was lying. By the time I said that, we were so sick of this idea of writing and singing together, especially me, that I started this thing about we never wrote together, we were never in the same room, which wasn't true, We wrote a lot of stuff together, or one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball. Like in I Wanna Hold Your Hand, I remember when we got the chord that made the song. We were in Jane Ash's house, downstairs in the cellar, both playing on the piano at the same time, and we had, oh, you got that song, and Paul hits this chord, and I turned to him, I said, that's it. I said, do that again. In those days, we really used to absolutely write like that, both playing into each other's noses.
What songs really stick in your mind as being Lennon-McCartney songs?
I Wanna Hold Your Hand, From Me to You, She Loves You. I'd have to have the list, there's so many, there's trillions of them. We used to spend hours and hours and hours. We wrote in the back of vans together. We wrote She Loves You in a van on the way to Newcastle, and From Me to You. Paul did come and see the show. I didn't,
What do you...
I said I read the news today, oh boy, that's what I said. In We Can Work It Out, Paul did the first half, I did the middle 8. But you've got Paul writing, we can work it out, real optimistic, and me, impatient. Life is very short, and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend.
Paul tells the story, John philosophizes.
Sure. Well, I was always like that, I was like that before the Beatles and after the Beatles. I always asked why people did things and why society was like what it was. I didn't just accept it for what it was apparently doing. I always looked below the surface. To express myself, I'd write Spaniard in the Works, or in his own right, the personal stories which were expressive of my personal emotions. I'd have a separate songwriter, John Lennon, who wrote songs for the sort of meat market. And I didn't consider them, the lyrics or anything, to have any sort of depth at all. They were just a joke, Then I started being me about the songs, not writing them objectively, but subjectively. I always had an easier time with lyrics, although Paul is quite a capable lyricist who doesn't think he is, therefore he doesn't try. He would avoid the problem rather than face it. But in the early days, lyrics didn't really count, as long as we had some vague theme. She loves you, he loves her, they love each other. It was the hook and the line and the sound we were going for. And that's still my attitude, but I just can't leave lyrics alone. I have to have them make sense apart from the song. See, the ones I like are ones that stand as words, without melody. They don't have to have any melody, It's a poem, you could read them.
That's your ultimate criterion?
No, it's just the ones I happen to like. If you notice, in the early days, the majority of the singles, in the movies and everything, were mine. And only when I became self-conscious and inhibited, and maybe the astrology wasn't right, did Paul start dominating the group a little too much for my liking. But in the early period, obviously, I'm dominating the group. I did practically every single with my voice, except for Love Me Do. Either my song or my voice or both. The only reason he sang on Hard Day's Night was because I couldn't reach the note. When I'm home, everything seems to be right. When I'm home, which is what we do sometimes when one of us couldn't reach a note, but he wanted a different sound, so he'd get the other to do the harmony.
Was there resentment from Paul at first?
No, it wasn't resentment, but it was competitive. But I had Please Please Me, and most of She Loves You, and most of From Me to You is all my voice. What comes after that? Let me think. Well, whatever. You listen to early Beatles and you'll hear it. I Want to Hold Your Hand. Again, I was the lead voice on that. So up to that period, it was mainly my domination on the record scene. Although I never dominated the fan worship because, the kids, the girls always went for him. Mine was a male following more than a female following.
What do you think are your best songs?
Ever.
Ever. What's the best song you've written?
One best song.
Have you thought of that?
I don't know what it is. I don't know, you see. It's like somebody asked me what's my favorite song. Is it Stardust or something? I can't. It's that kind of decision making I can't make. I've always liked Walrus, Strawberry Fields, Help, In My Life. And those are some favorites.
Why Help?
Because I meant it. It's real. It's the lyric is as good now as it was then. It's no different. And it makes me feel secure to know that I was that sensible or whatever, That not sensible, but aware of myself then. I didn't realize it at the time, but I just wrote the song because I was commissioned to write it for the movie. But later, I knew I really was crying out for help. The most humiliating experiences for me were all those when we were sitting with the governor of the Bahamas because we were making help and being insulted by these fucking junked up middle class bitches and bastards who would be commenting on our work and classness, and our manners. And I was always drunk by the typical, whatever it is, insulting them. I couldn't take it. It hurt me, so I would go insane, swearing at them and whatever. I would always do something to, I couldn't take it. It was awful, and all that business was awful, It was a fucking humiliation. One has to completely humiliate oneself to be what the Beatles were. And that's what I resent, I mean, I did it, but I didn't know. I didn't foresee that, it just it happened bit by bit, and you gradually, this complete craziness is surrounding you. And you're doing exactly what you don't want to do with the people you can't stand. The people you hated when you were 10. And that's what I'm saying in this album. I'm saying, I remember what it's all about now, you fuckers. Fuck you all. That's what I'm saying. Fuck you all. You don't get me twice. Now, I may be very positive, yes, but I also go through deep depressions where I would like to jump out the window. And it gets easier to deal with as I get older. And I don't know whether you learn control or when you grow up you calm down a little.
At some point right in there between Help and Hard Day's Night, you know, got into drugs and got into doing drug songs.
Hard Day's Night, I was on pills. That's drugs, you know. That's bigger drugs than pot. I've been on pills since I was 15 or no, since I was 17. Since I became a musician. The only way to survive in Hamburg, to play 8 hours a night, was to take pills. Like the waiters gave you the pills and drink. I was a fucking drop-down drunk in art school. I was a pill addict until Help. Well, just before Help, when we turned onto pot and we dropped drink. Simple as that.
How about other drugs?
If somebody gives me a joint, I might smoke it, but I don't go after it, you know.
I've always needed a drug to survive. I can't, and the others too, but I always had more. I always took more pills and more of everything, because I'm more crazy.
Why is everybody taking drugs? And to escape from what? Is life so terrible? Do we live in such a terrible situation that we can't do anything about it without, you know, reinforcement from alcohol or tobacco or sleeping pills, you know? I'm not preaching about it, I'm just saying a drug is a drug. Why we take them is important, not who's selling it to whom on the corner.
It went on for years. I must have had 1,000 trips, you know.
Literally 1,000?
Oh, yeah.
Or a couple of hundred?
No, lots. You know, I used to just eat it all the time.
Through what album?
I don't know. I never took it in the studio. Once I did it, accidentally. I thought I was taking some uppers, and I was not in a state of handling it, you know.
Right.
And I can't remember what album it was, but I took it, and I just noticed, I said, you know, so scared on the mic, you know. I said, I don't, what was it? You know, I said, I feel ill, and I thought I felt ill, and I thought it was going cracked. I said, well, I must get some air, and they all took me upstairs on the roof, and George Martin was looking at me funny, and then it dawned on me I must have taken acid. I said, well, I can't go on, I'll have to go. So I just said, you have to do it, and I'll just stay and watch. And I was just, you know, like, very nervous and watching them all, and I said, is it all right? And they're going, yeah, all being very kind, and yes, it's all right. And I said, are you sure it's all right? I said, and they carried on making the record.
Do you still take LSD?
Not in years. A little mushroom or peyote's not beyond my scope. Maybe twice a year or something.
Honestly, aren't the Beatles on their way out?
I don't think so. I think they're still strong.
Wherever we went, there was always a whole scene going. We had our 4 bedrooms separate from trying to keep them out of our room. And Derek and Neil's rooms were always full of junk and whores and fuck knows what, policemen, everything. Satyricon, you know? We had to do something. And what do you do when the pill doesn't wear off and it's time to go? You just can't. I used to be up all night with Derek, whether there was anybody there or not. I just could never sleep. Such a heavy scene it was. Like anyone that they're all into now, but they didn't call them groupies then. They called it something else. But if you couldn't get groupies, we had whores and everything. Whatever was going.
Who would arrange for all that stuff?
Derek and Neil, that was their job. And Mal, but I'm not going into all that.
Like businessmen on a convention.
Sure it was. I mean, when we hit town, we hit it. You know, we're not pissing about.
I was the real pig. You know? And it is a relief not to be a pig. You know, the pressures of being a pig were enormous. They were killing me. All those years of trying to be tough in the heavy rocker and heavy womanizer and heavy drinker, they were killing me. And it is a relief not to have to do it.
Fucking big bastards. That's what the Beatles were. And you have to be a bastard to make it, man. That's a fact. And the Beatles are the biggest bastards on earth. It's like Alan's Christmas card says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will feel no evil, because I'm the biggest bastard in the valley, or something. But yeah, there's no kidding. If you make it, you're a bastard, you know.
How did you manage to keep that clean image? It's amazing, isn't it?
Because everybody wants the image to carry on. You know, the press around with you want to carry on because they want the free drinks and the free whores and the fun. Everybody wants to keep on the bandwagon. It's Satyricon. We were the Caesar. Shoo. Who's going to knock us when there's £1 million to be made? All the handouts, the bribery, the police, all the fucking hype. Everybody wanted in. You know, everybody. That's why some of them are still trying to cling on to this. You know, don't take it away from us, you know. Don't take Rome from us. Not a portable Rome
That's true.
where we all have our houses and our cars and our lovers and our wives and office girls and parties and drink and drugs. You know, don't take it from us. Otherwise, you're mad, John. You're crazy. You know, silly John wants to take all this away.
I don't have any hankering to be looked upon as a sex object, a male macho rock and roll singer. I like to look good and I like to be attractive, and you know, I enjoy the macho part of rock, but I don't have any need to be the idol, you know, and have people think that I just snap my fingers and teeny boppers come crawling in my bed and that's the way life is. 'Cause it ain't like that, and I don't want it to be like that. That's maybe for younger guys who just start in the business, think, you know, good golden groupies, and that's how it is. But that's, you know, I got over that a long, long time ago, you know. And I'm interested in ourselves, in the family, and making some music.
Can you tell me if that White album with the drawing by Klaus Forman on it? There's an album.
Revolver?
Was that before Rubber Soul or after?
After.
Oh, I see. Rubber Soul came after.
You really don't remember which?
No. Maybe the others do. I don't remember those kind of things because it doesn't mean anything. It's all gone now.
Well, Rubber Soul was like it seemed like the first attempt to do a serious sort of, you know.
No, we just were getting better technically and musically, that's all. I mean, we finally took over the studio. I mean, in the early days we had to take what we were given. We had to make it in 2 hours, or it was. And 3 takes was enough. We didn't know about you could get more bass and do. You know. We were learning the technique, and Rubber Soul we were sort of more precise about making the album. That's all. I mean, we took over the cover and everything.
What was Rubber Soul? That was just a simple play on.
Well, that was Paul's title. That's what it was, like your blues, I suppose. You know, meaning English soul. You know, Rubber Soul, I suppose, just a pun. Nothing. You see, there's no great mysterious meanings behind all this. It was just 4 boys, you know, working out what to call a new album.
I'm not satisfied with any individual or Beatles album. You know, there's too many fill-ins and paddings.
You said to me Sgt. Pepper is the one. That was the album?
Well, it was a peak.
On Sgt. Pepper, which was his idea too, I managed to come up with Lucy in the Sky and Day in the Life under the pressure of only 10 days. You know. Even so, I was in more at the start. Later on, I had sort of succumbed to marriage and eating.
See, I think Paul had a tendency to come along and say, well, he's written his 10 songs, let's record now. And I said, well, give us a few days and I'll knock a few off.
Which is when things began to change. Well, that's when I started to free myself from the Beatles, and that's when everybody started getting a bit upset.
How did you meet Yoko?
I'm sure I've told you this many times. She was red hot. You know, there was going to be something about black bags, and I thought it was all going to be sex. You know, artsy-fartsy orgies, you know, great. Well, it was far out, but it was not the way I thought it was going to be. I went in, and she didn't know who I was or anything. I was wandering around, and there was a couple of artsy-type students who'd been helping lying around the gallery. I'm feeling a bit defensive, you know, thinking, oh, they must be the hip ones. But no, it turns out they were just assistants putting all this stuff together for her. There was an apple on sale for 200 quid. I thought it was fantastic. You know, I got the humor in her work immediately. I thought, you know, this is a joke. this is pretty funny, and I'm beginning to see the humor of it. And I said, how much for the apple? It's all £200. Oh, really? Oh, I see. Okay. Well, how much for the bent nails? And So, you know, I'm wandering around having a good time. I went downstairs and she came up and handed me a card, which said breathe on it. It's one of her instructions. And so I went. And she said, "That's it, you got it." And I thought, well, all right, okay, I got it. And, you know, there was another piece which really decided me for or against the artist. A ladder which led to a painting which was hung on the ceiling, and it looked like a blank canvas with a chain with a spyglass hanging on the end of it. So I climbed the ladder, and you know, I looked through the spyglass, and there's tiny little writing there. And so you really have to stand on the top of the ladder like this, you know, and you know, so you're on this ladder, and you feel like a fool. You could fall at any minute, and you know, and you look through, and it just says yes. So it was positive. I felt relieved. But all the so-called, you know, avant-garde art at the time and everything that was supposedly interesting was all this, you know, it was all negative. You know, all this smash the piano with a hammer, break the sculpture, boring, negative crap. It was all and all this stuff, you know. And, you know, it was all anti. It was anti-art, anti-establishment. It's a great relief when you get up the ladder and it doesn't say no or fuck you or something. It said yes. And just that yes made me stay in a gallery full of apples and nails instead of walking out and saying, I'm not going to buy any of this crap, you know. And then I went up to this thing that said hammer a nail in. I said, well, can I hammer a nail in? And she says, no. Because the gallery was actually opening the next day. And so the owner, Dunbar, says, you know, let him hammer a nail in. He's a millionaire, he might buy it. But she's more interested in having it look nice and pretty and white for the opening, you know. And you know, that's why she never made any money on this stuff. She was always too busy protecting it. So there was this little conference, and she finally said, well, okay, you can hammer a nail in for 5 shillings. And so smart ass here says, oh, well, I'll give you an imaginary 5 shillings and hammer an imaginary nail in, you know. And that's when we really met, you know. That's when we locked eyes and she got it and I got it, and that was our meeting. And the rest, as they say, you know, all the interviews we do is history.
What happened to those pieces?
Well, no, I'll show them to you. They're in the house. Sean and I put an apple on the stand now and then, but Sean always eats it.
The word mysticism is just being arrived at through people's ignorance. There's nothing mystical about it, only that you're ignorant of what that entails.
He went to India. He was influenced by Maharshi.
It's really like writers take themselves to Singapore to get the atmosphere. So wherever I am, you know. All this stuff on the White Album was written in India while we were supposedly giving money to Maharishi, which we never did. We got our mantra and we sat in the mountains eating lousy vegetarian food and writing all those songs. You know, we wrote tons of songs in India. I was gonna take her, but I backed out and lost my nerve because I was gonna take my wife and Yoko, but I didn't know how to work it. So I didn't do it. I didn't quite do it.
Sexy Sadie you wrote about the Maharishi.
Well, that was about Maharishi, yeah. I copped out and wouldn't write. Maharishi, what have you done? You made a fool of everyone.
When did you...
But now it can be told, fab listeners.
When did you realize that he was making a fool of you?
I don't know, I just sort of saw him, you know. You know, it seems my partings are always not as nice as I'd like them to be. There was a big hullabaloo about him raping Mia Farrow and trying to get off with Mia Farrow and a few other women and things like that. And we went down to him and we'd stayed up all night discussing was it true or not true, you know. And when George started thinking it might be true, I thought, well, it must be true, because if George is doubting it, there must be something in it. So we went to see Mahari, the whole gang of us, the next day, all charged down to his hut, you know, his bungalow, his very rich-looking bungalow in the mountains. And I was the spokesman. As usual, when the dirty work came, I actually had to be leader. Wherever the scene was, when it came to the nitty-gritty, I had to do the speaking. So I said, we're leaving. Why? Hee hee, and all that shit, you know. And I said, well, if you're so cosmic. You'll know why. Because he was always intimating. There are all these right-hand men intimating that he did miracles, you know. And I said, you know why? He says, I don't know why. You must tell me. And I just kept saying, and he gave me a look like, I'll kill you, bastard. He gave me such a look, and I knew then when he looked at me, you know, because I'd called his bluff. Because if you know all, you know, cosmic conscious. That's what we're all here for. I was a bit rough to him, you know.
You were expecting too much.
I always do, you know. I always expect too much. I always expected my mother and don't get her. And that's what it is. Awesome parents. I know that much.
At first I was bitter about Maharishi being human and bitter about Janov being human. I'm not bitter anymore. They're human, and I'm just thinking what a dummy I was. Although I meditate, and I cry.
It's just trying to mix business with enjoyment.
Pleasure.
How much money do you have now?
I'm not telling.
I worked for money, and I wanted to be rich, so what the hell? If that's a paradox, then I'm not a socialist. What the hell, you know? But I'm not anything. I was instinctively for the workers because that was the people I was living with. You know, although lots of workers are right-wing. What I used to be was guilty about money, and that's why I lost it. You know, either by giving it away or allowing myself to be screwed by so-called managers, or whatever you call them.
Alan's got me more real money in the bank than I've ever had in the whole period. I've got money that I've earned for 8 or 10 years of my fucking life, instead of all the Dick James Music Company having it.
How much were you making in that period?
Oh, I don't know. I just know it was millions, you know.
Why does anyone need $150 million? Couldn't you be perfectly content with $100 million or $1 million?
What would you suggest I do? Give everything away and walk the streets? I wasn't content with no dollars. I wasn't content with $1 million. And I'm not content with 100 million. Contentment doesn't lie in money.
Then why be in the game of getting more?
Because to do what I do, I need what money does.
150 million?
It's all relative, isn't it?
What about all the talk about transcending possessions?
You can transcend possessions without walking around in a robe. And possessions can be in the mind. A monk who's off in a cave dreaming of fucking sucking and eating, he is in a far worse position than me, who has so-called money in his back pocket. You know, I'm over the conflict that says you can't be awake and have money. That's absolute rubbish. You know, when Christ said, it's as easy for a rich man to get into heaven as it is to go through the eye of the needle, I took it literally. That one has to dump possessions to get through to nirvana, or whatever you call it. But an intellectual has less chance of getting through than me. They're possessed of ideas.
You don't think you've saved a single life. What do you know about a protest movement anyway?
Why did you make Revolution?
Which one?
Both.
There's 3 of them. There's 3.
Right. Starting with the single.
The Beatles were getting really tense with one another. Now, I did the slow version and wanted it out as a single, as a statement on the Beatles' position on Vietnam and the Beatles' position on revolution.
When George and Paul and all them were on holiday, I made Revolution, which is on the LP. And Revolution number 9, I wanted to put it out as a single, but they said it wasn't good enough. They came over, I had it all prepared, and they came round and said it wasn't good enough. And we put out what? Hello, Goodbye, or some shit, I don't know. No, we put Hey Jude, sorry, which was worth it, but we could have had both, you know? I wanted to say what I thought about Revolution. I thought it was about time we fucking spoke about it. The same as I thought it was about time we stopped not answering about the Vietnamese war on tour with Brian, you know? We had to tell him, we're gonna talk about the war this time. We're not gonna just waffle. I wanted to say what I thought about Revolution. I'd been thinking about it up in the hills in India, and I still had this, you know, God will save us feeling about it. It's gonna be alright, but even now I'm saying, hold on, John, it's gonna be alright. You know, otherwise I won't hold on, you know?
They were so upset over the Yoko thing and the fact that, you know, I was again becoming as creative and dominating as I had been in the early days after lying fallow for a couple of years. It upset the apple cart. I was awake again and they weren't used to it.
On one version I said, in. You were about violence, out. Because I wasn't sure, but the version we put out said, count me out, I think. Because I don't fancy a violent revolution happening all over. I don't want to die, But I begin to think, well, what else can happen? I mean, it seems inevitable.
I want to see the plan. And that's what I used to say to Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman. Count me out if it's for violence. And don't expect me on the barricades unless it is with flowers. As far as overthrowing something in the name of Marxism or Christianity, I want to know what you're going to do after you've knocked it all down. I mean, can't we use some of it? What's the point in bombing Wall Street? If you want to change the system, go and change the system. It's no good shooting people.
The Chairman Mao bit, I always feel a bit strange about, because I thought that they're going to get hurt, The idea was don't aggravate the pig by waving the thing that the red flag in his face, I really thought that, love would save us all, But now I'm wearing a Chairman Mao badge, so that's where it's at. I'm just beginning to think he's doing a good job,
No messages from any phony politician are coming through me. I said that earlier, and it's still true. That still stands. I dabbled in so-called politics in the late 60s and 70s more out of guilt than anything. Guilt for being rich, and guilt thinking that perhaps love and peace isn't enough and that you have to go and get shot or something. Or go and get punched in the face to prove I'm one of the people. I was doing it against my instincts.
You don't really believe that we're headed for a violent revolution?
Well, I don't know. I've got no more conception than you. I can't see. Eventually it'll happen. It will happen. It has to happen. What else can happen? It might happen now, or it might happen in 100 years.
Having a violent revolution now might just be the end of the world.
Not necessarily. They say that every time, but I don't really believe it, you see. If it is, okay. I'm back to where I was when I was 17. And at 17, I used to wish a fucking earthquake or revolution had happened so I could go out and steal and do what the blacks are doing now. If I was black, I'd be all for it. If I was 17, I'd be all for it too, because what have you got to lose? Now I've got something to lose. I don't want to die, and I don't want to be hurt physically. But if they blow the world up, fuck it. We're all out of our pain then. Forget it. No more problems,
Politics is inclusive, like art and eating and having babies. It isn't just something you do every 4 years. As Gore Vidal often quotes, don't vote for them, it only encourages them. I have never voted for anybody anytime ever. Even at my most so-called political, I've never registered and I never will. And that's going to make a lot of people upset, but that's too bad. I'm with the majority. The majority don't vote. Well, they know better.
There's a point in which you decided you'd give up your private life? You and Yoko would give up your private life?
No, we never decided to give up our private life, but we decided if we were going to do anything, like get married or like this film that we're going to make now, that we would dedicate it to peace, that on the concept of peace. And during that period, because we are what we are, it evolved that somehow we ended up being responsible to produce peace. Even in our own heads, we would get that way.
Gandhi and Martin Luther King are great examples of fantastic non-violence who died violently. I can never work that out.
Yeah.
We're pacifists, but I'm not sure. It's always that. Mm-hmm. But what does it mean when you're such a pacifist that you get shot? I can never understand that.
The Revolution #9 was an unconscious picture of what I actually think will happen when it happens. That was just like a drawing of revolution.
The slow version of Revolution on the album went on and on and on. And I took the fade out part, which is what they sometimes do with disco records now, and just layered all this stuff over it.
I was getting like Beethoven and that from upstairs and chopping it up and making it backwards and things like that to get sound effects.
I got an engineer's tape on which some test engineer was saying,
"This is EMI test series number 9. you know, like that. So I just cut off whatever he said. And number 9, and 9 is, it turned out to be my birthday and my lucky number and everything, but I didn't realize it. It was just so funny. The voice was, number 9,
Number 9.
number 9.
Number 9.
It was like a joke, bringing number 9 in all the time. That's all it was.
Yoko was there for the whole thing, and she made decisions about which loops to use, and it was somewhat under her influence, I suppose.
If that isn't a picture of two shy people, I'd like to know what shyness is. Oh, what filth.
See, I presumed that I would just be able to carry on and just bring Yoko into our life. But it seemed that I either had to be married to them or Yoko. And I chose Yoko, you know? And I was right.
What were the reactions when you first brought Yoko by?
They despised her, you know?
When John was a Beatle, we stayed in a room, and John and I were in bed, and the door was closed and all that, but not locked. And one of the Beatle assistants just walked in and talked to him as if I weren't there.
He was used to people being in bed with me, you know, so any female was just sort of nobody.
It was mind-blowing, you know. I was invisible.
Like Peter Brown in our office, and you can put this in. After we come round for 6 months, he comes down and shakes my hand, doesn't even say hello to her, no?
And when she complained to me, you know, I couldn't understand, you know, he's good old Charlie or whatever. He's been with us 20 years, you know, she'll come around.
You sit through 60 sessions with the most big-headed, uptight people on earth and see what it's fucking like. And be insulted by them just because you love someone. That's... George gave her insulted her right to her face in Apple office at the beginning. Just being straightforward, you know, that game of, well, I'm going to be up front because this is what I've heard. Dylan and a few people said you've got a lousy name in New York and you give off bad vibes. That's what George said to her. We both sat through it, and I didn't hit him, I don't know why. But I was always hoping they'd come round. You know, I couldn't believe it, you know. And they all sat there with their wives like a fucking jury and judged us. The only thing I did was write that piece about some of our beast friends. In my usual way, because I was never honest. I always had to write that gobbledygook. And that's what they did to us. Ringo was all right, so was Maureen. But the other two really gave it to us. I never forgive them. I don't care what fucking shit about Hare Krishna and God and Paul about what I've changed my mind, you know. I don't forgive him for that.
Knowing Yoko, I can't imagine she took it very well.
Oh, no. She fought every inch of the way.
Until finally I couldn't take it any longer. But I would have had the same difficulty, though, you know, even if I hadn't gotten involved with
John.
John.
John's the name.
But John wasn't just John. He was also his group and the people around them. When I say John, it's not just
It's John.
John.
It's John, from Johann, I believe.
I don't mind, I'll play, you know, whatever you want me to play. Or I won't play at all if you don't want me to play. No, whatever it is that will please you, I'll do it.
I'd like to ask some more questions about Paul and go through that. Let me ask you this. We went and saw Let It Be in San Francisco.
Yeah.
What was your feeling? What did you...
I felt sad, you know. Also felt that that film was set up by Paul for Paul. And that's one of the main reasons the Beatles ended, you know. Because I can't speak for George, but I pretty damn well know we got fed up of being sidemen for Paul. After Brian died, that's what began to happen to us. And the camera work was set up to show Paul and not to show anybody else.
Phil Spector was brought in to produce Let It Be.
When Spector came round, we was like, well, all right, if you want to work with us, go and do your audition, man. You know, do, and he worked like a pig on it, you know. He'd always wanted to work with the Beatles, and he was given the shittiest load of badly recorded shit with a lousy feeling to it, ever. But he made something out of it. It wasn't fantastic, but it was, you know, when I heard it, I didn't puke. I thought, oh, you know, I was so relieved that after hearing 6 months of this, like, black cloud hanging over, that this was going to go out. You know? I thought it'd be good to go out the shitty version, because it would break the Beatles. It would break the myth. That's what we really. That's us with no trousers on, and no glossy paint over the cover, no sort of hype, you know. This is what we're like with our trousers off. So, would you please end the game now? But that didn't happen, and Paul wouldn't. We ended up doing Abbey Road quickly and putting out something slick to preserve the myth.
There's always a lot of speculation about whether John, Paul, George, and Ringo are dreaded enemies or the best of friends.
Well, neither.
What did you think of Abbey Road?
I liked the A side. I never liked that sort of whatever pop opera on the other side. You know, I think it's junk.
It was one of the most sort of fragmented things.
Yeah, because it's just bits of song thrown together. You know.
Everybody praises the album so much, but none of the songs had anything to do with each other. You know, no thread at all, only the fact that we stuck them together.
I would have expanded the Beatles and broken the myth and get their pants off. You know, stop being God, but it didn't work. It didn't work. And Yoko was naive. She came in and expected to perform with them, like you would with any group. She was jamming, you know, but there'd be a sort of coldness about it. So, I mean, when I decided to leave the group, that's when I decided, you know, that I could no longer artistically get anything out of the Beatles. And here was somebody that could turn me on to a million things.
You make it sound almost like a teacher-pupil relationship.
It is a teacher-pupil relationship. And that's what people don't understand. She's the teacher and I'm the pupil. I'm the famous one. I'm the one that's supposed to know everything, but she's my teacher. She's taught me everything I fucking know.
Yoko played me at tapes I understood. I know it was very strange and avant-garde music is a tough thing to assimilate and all that, but I've heard the Beatles playing avant-garde music when nobody was looking for years, you know. But they're artists, and all artists have fucking big egos, whether they like to admit it or not. And when a new artist came into the group, they was never allowed.
You know, I don't think anybody should be that interested in every detail of my life.
Yeah.
From Beatles to now. But anybody who claims to have some interest in me as an individual artist, or even as part of the Beatles, has absolutely misunderstood everything I ever said. If they can't see why I'm with Yoko,
Right.
And if they can't see that, then they don't see anything. You know, they're just jacking off to, could be any, Mick Jagger, or somebody else. You know. Let them go and jack off to Mick Jagger, okay?
You appreciate
I
that.
don't need it. I absolutely don't need it, you know. Let them chase wings, you know. Just forget about me. If that's what you want, go after Paul or Mick. I ain't here for that. Go play with the rolling wings.
Well,
No, just can we get back to this other stuff for a second, like you do sometimes? You can't let go of it? Because nobody ever said anything about what Paul having a spell over me when I was with him for a long time, or me having a spell over Paul. They didn't think that was abnormal. 2 guys together, or 4 guys together in those days?
Yeah.
I mean, why didn't anybody ever say, how come those guys don't split up? I mean, what's going on backstage? I mean, what is that Paul and John business? Why, you know, how can they be together so long?
Yeah.
But we spent more time together than John and Yoko in the early days, the 4 of us sleeping in the same room, practically the same bed, in the same truck. All right, doing everything together. Nobody said a damn thing about being under the spell. They tried. Maybe they said we were under the spell of Brian Epstein or George Martin or something. There's always somebody has to be doing something to you.
Yeah.
We are the ones that cast the spell, not
Guys are all right. Come on.
Oh yeah,
you know.
all the boys is all right, but you go with a woman, there's something abnormal.
A twist.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Boy.
a twist and a half, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to finish that one up with that because Jesus, nobody ever says it.
It's really quite true.
They're congratulating the Stones on being together 112 years. Whoopee.
Yeah.
Whoopee.
What is holding back people from understanding Yoko?
Well, she was doing all right before she met Elvis, you know. But people tend like, when I was telling them, Howard Smith announced he was going to play her music, and all these idiots rang up saying, don't dare play it, she split the Beatles. She didn't split the Beatles, and even if she did, so what that got to do with a fucking record? But she's a woman, and she's Japanese. There's racial prejudice against her, and there's female prejudice against her. It's as simple as that.
Nobody controls me. I'm uncontrollable. The only one that can control me is me, and that's just barely possible. And that's what life's about, and that's the lesson that I'm learning. Because if somebody's going to impress me, whether it be a Maharishi, or a Janov, or a Yoko, and there comes a point where the emperor has no clothes, because I do stupid things, I've done stupid things, I'm naive, but I'm also not stupid. So there comes a point where I will see, and nobody can pull the wool that long. Mm-hmm. So for all you folks out there who think that I'm having the wool pulled over my eyes, well, that's an insult to me. Not that you think less of Yoko, because that's your problem, what you think of Yoko. What I think of her is what counts. But if you think you know me, or you have some part of me because of the music, and then you think that I'm being controlled like a dog on a leash because I do things with her, then screw you. Well, because, fuck you, brother or sister, you don't know what's happening. Yeah. I'm not here for you. I'm here for me and her. And now the baby. And
see, another thing is, of course, it's a total insult to me.
Well,
because,
you're always insulted, my dear.
It's
natural.
I don't even bother to control anybody because, why should I,
She doesn't need me.
I have my whole life, right?
She doesn't need a beetle.
If I'm a con...
Who needs a beetle?
I can be alone without Yoko. I just have no wish to be. There's no reason on earth why I should be alone. There's nothing more important than our relationship. Nothing. We dig being together. All the time, And both of us could survive apart, but what for,
I thought it would be a good idea that he would go to LA and just leave me alone for a while.
What a horrible place to send somebody. What happened, John?
Well, first I thought, whoopee, bachelor life, whoopee, whoopee. And then I woke up one day and thought, well, what is this? I want to come home. But she wouldn't let me come home. That's why it was 18 months instead of 6. But, we were talking all the time on the phone, and I kept saying, I don't like this. I'm out of control. I'm drinking. I'm getting into trouble, and I'd like to come home, please. And she's saying, you're not ready to come home. What are you saying? Well, okay, back to the bottle.
Yoko, what did that mean you're not ready?
Well, she has her ways, whether they be mystical or practical. When she says it's not ready, it ain't ready.
Back to the bottle?
Oh, yeah. I was just insane, The lost weekend that lasted 18 months. I've never drunk so much in my life, and I've been drinking since I was 15. But I really tried to drown myself in the bottle, and it took an awful lot. I don't seem strong physically that much, but it just seems to take an amazing lot to put me down. And I was with the heaviest drinkers in the industry, which is Harry Nilsson and Bobby Keys and Keith Moon and all them. And we just couldn't pull ourselves out. I think Harry might be still trying, poor bugger. God bless you, Harry, wherever you are. But Jesus, I had to get out of there because somebody was going to die. And Keith Moon did. It was like, who's going to die first? And unfortunately, Keith was the one. But I got out.
I'm not going to sacrifice love. Real love for any fucking whore, or any friend, or any business. Because in the end, you're alone, at night, and neither of us want to be. And you can't fill the bed with groupies, it doesn't work. I don't want to be a swinger, because it doesn't... Like I said in the song, I've been through it all, and nothing works better than to have somebody you love hold you.
Later on, though, love is different, and one can slow down a little. Mm-hmm. It's not less, just different.
The event is so momentous that historians may one day view it as a landmark in the decline of the British Empire. The Beatles are breaking up.
To go back to Apple, sort of on break up with the Beatles, and Brian died, you went to India.
I didn't really want to do all this, Go on.
You know?
we're halfway through it now, so let's
It's
do it.
fine.
You said you quit the Beatles first.
Yeah.
How?
I said to Paul, I'm leaving. We were in Apple, and I just, on the way over, I knew before we went to Toronto. I told Alan I was leaving. I told Eric Clapton and Klaus that I was leaving, and I'd like to probably use them as a group. I hadn't decided how to do it, to have a permanent new group or what. And Eric, later on I thought, fuck it, I'm not gonna get stuck with another set of people, whoever they are. Well, I announced it to myself and the people around me on the way to Toronto the few days before, and on the plane, Alan came with me. I told Alan, it's over, and and then when I got back, there was a few meetings, and Alan said, well, cool it, because there was a lot to do, business-wise, and it wouldn't have been suitable at the time, And then we were discussing something in the office with Paul, and Paul was saying something like to do something or other, and I just kept saying no, like to everything he said, you see. So I came to a point where I had to say something, and Paul said, what do you mean? I said, I mean, the group's over, I'm leaving. But Alan was there, and he'll remember exactly, and she will, but this is my, how I see it. But Alan was saying, don't tell. He didn't want me to tell Paul even. And I couldn't help. So, it's out. I couldn't stop it. It came out. When Paul and Alan said they were glad I wasn't going to announce it. I was going to make an event out of it. Right? Paul and Alan both. I don't know whether Paul said don't tell anybody, but he was damn pleased that I wasn't. He said, oh, that means nothing really happened if you're not going to say anything.
What was Paul's reaction when you said...
Well, like anybody when you say divorce, their face goes all sorts of colors. It was like he knew all, really, that this was the final thing. And 6 months later he comes out with whatever. I told Ray Cohen, he says, a lot of people knew I'd left, but I was a fool not to do it.
What?
Not to do what Paul did, which was use it to sell a record.
You were really angry with Paul.
No, I wasn't angry.
Well, when he came out with...
No, I wasn't angry. I was just shit, He's a good PR man, Paul. He's about the best in the world, probably. He really does a job. And I wasn't angry in that way. I was... We were all hurt that he didn't tell us what he was going to do. I think he claims he didn't mean for that to happen, but that's bullshit, He called me on the afternoon of that day and said, I'm doing what you and Yoko were doing.
Last year.
And I said, good, because the time last year, they were all looking at us as if we were strange, trying to make our life together and doing other things than being fat myths. He rang me up on that day and said, I'm doing what you and Yoko are doing and putting out an album, and I'm leaving the group too, he said. I said, good. I was feeling a little strange, because he was saying it this time, although it was a year later. I said, good, that's it. Because he was the one that wanted the Beatles most, and then the Midnight Papers came out.
How'd you feel then?
I was cursing because I hadn't done it.
Don't get me wrong, I still love those guys. The Beatles are over, but John, Paul, George, and Ringo go on. I mean, just because I'm upset about George's book doesn't mean that's all I feel. You understand? I like them, and it's over. You get it? Yeah. I mean, I don't want to start another whole thing between me and George just because of the way I feel today. Tomorrow, I'll feel absolutely differently. It's not important anyway. I don't feel that or anything only about him or any of them. It's very complicated, and there are a lot of mixed emotions about all of them. I mean, that's why it's difficult to say anything. I don't want to come off niggling. It's stupid in as much as the repercussions are not worth some sort of offhand remarks about each other.
Would you take it all back?
What?
Being a Beatle?
If I could be a fucking fisherman, I would. You know, if I had the capabilities of being something other than I am, I would. It's no fun being an artist. It isn't. I mean, you know what it's like, writing. It isn't fun. It's torture. I read about Van Gogh or Beethoven or any of the fuckers. You know, I was reading an article the other day. Well, if they'd had psychiatrists, we wouldn't have had Gauguin's great pictures. You know, and these fucking bastards are just sucking us to death. You know, that's about all that we can do is do it like fucking circus animals. Now, I resent being an artist. In that respect, I resent performing for fucking idiots who don't know anything because they can't feel. I'm the one that's feeling, because I'm the one expressing what they are trying to. They live vicariously through me and other artists, and we're the one like Ian the Boxers. Ringo come in the ring, Oscar comes in the ring, they're booing the shit out of him. He only hit Clay once, they're all cheering him. That's why I resent. I'd sooner be in the audience, really, but I'm not capable of it. And one of my big things is I wish I was a fucking fisherman. I know it sounds silly, and I'd sooner be rich than poor and all the rest of that shit, but the pain, you know, I wish I'd sooner not be. Ignorance is bliss, or something. If you don't know, man, there's no pain. Oh, probably there is, but that's how I express it. It's shit.
Why'd you become a house husband?
It was a case of heal thyself.
It was asking what is more important in our life.
It was more important to face ourselves
Yeah.
and to face that reality than to continue a life of rock and roll showbiz and either go up and down with the winds of either your own performance or the public's opinion of you.
I'm in to sell as many albums as I can, you know, and as many records as I possibly can, you know, because I'm an artist who wants everybody to love me and everyone to buy my stuff. You know.
Part of me suspects I'm a loser, you know, and part of me thinks I'm God Almighty.
Do you think you're a genius?
Yes. If there's such a thing as one, I am one. You know.
When did you first realize it?
Well, that was about 12. I used to think, I must be a genius, but nobody's noticed.
Let's say in one way, I was always hip, man. I was hip in kindergarten, you know. I was different from others then, you know. I was different all my life.
Well, I'm a genius or I'm mad. Which is it? I said, I can't be mad because nobody's put me away. Therefore, I'm a genius.
I don't think I'm either. You know, crazy and genius don't really mean anything anymore. I don't literally mean genius as the things we deify, but as the spirit of genius that can come through anybody at any given time.
If there's such a thing as genius, which is just what? You know, what the fuck is it? I am one, you know? And if there isn't, I don't care, you know? But I used to think it when I was a kid, you know, writing me poetry and doing me paintings.
If somebody gave me a pair of glasses that makes me see through walls, you know, I can't help it. It doesn't make me better or worse than anybody else. I just see and hear differently from other people. The same way that musicians hear music differently from non-musicians.
What do you think the effect of the Beatles was on the history of Britain?
I don't know about on the history. I mean, the people in control and in power in this class system and the whole bullshit bourgeois scene is exactly the same. Only now there's a lot of fag fucking middle class kids with long hair walking around London in trendy clothes. And Kenneth Tynan's making a fortune out of the word fuck. Well, apart from that, nothing happened but we all dressed up. You know, the same bastards are in control, the same people are running everything. It's exactly the same. They hype the kids and the generation. There has been we've grown up a little, all of us, and there has been a change, and we are a bit freer and all that. But it's the same game. Nothing really changed. History a bit and shit, they're doing exactly the same thing. Selling arms to South Africa, killing blacks on the street. People are living in fucking poverty with fucking rats crawling over them. It's the same, you know, it just makes you puke, and I woke up to that too, you know. The dream is over. It's just the same. Only I'm 30 and a lot of people have got long hair, that's all.
In the early 70s, everybody was starting to say that the 60s was a joke. You know, it didn't mean anything. Those love and peaceniks were idiots. You know, we all have to face the reality of being nasty human beings who were born evil and everything's gonna be lousy and rotten, so boo-hoo. We had fun in the 60s, they said, but the others took it away from us and spoiled it all for us. And I was trying to say, no, just keep doing it.
Nothing happened except for we grew up. We did our thing just like they were telling us, while you kids, you know, it's exactly the same. You know, most of the so-called now generation are getting in a job and all that. Nothing changed. We're a minority, you know? We're a minority like people like us always were. But maybe we're a slightly larger minority because of something or other.
The people who are hung up on the Beatles and the 60s dream missed the whole point when the Beatles and the 60s became the point. Carrying the Beatles or the 60s dream around all your life is like carrying the Second World War and Glenn Miller around, you know. And that's not to say that you can't enjoy Glenn Miller or the Beatles, but you know, to live in that dream is the twilight zone. It's not living now, it's an illusion.
We all say a lot of things that we don't know what we're talking about. I'm probably doing it now. I don't know what I said, you know? See, everybody takes you up on the words you said in '94, and I'm just a guy who people ask, what about things, and I blab off. And some of it makes sense, and some of it's bullshit, and some of it's lies, and some of it's God knows what I'm saying, you know?
What is the 80s dream to you, John?
Well, make your own dream.
Right.
That's the Beatles' story, isn't it? Right. That's Yoko's story. That's what I'm saying now.
Right, yeah.
Produce your own dream. If you want to save Peru, go and save Peru. It's quite possible to do anything, but not to put it on leaders and parking meters. And don't expect Carter or Reagan or John Lennon or Yoko Ono or Bob Dylan or Jesus Christ to come and do it for you. You have to do it yourself. That's what the great masters and mistresses have been saying ever since time began.
Why?
They can point the way and leave signposts and little instructions in various books that are now called holy and worshipped for the cover of the book and not for what it says. But the instructions are all there for all to see. Have always been and always will be. There's nothing new under the sun. All roads lead to Rome. And people cannot provide it for you. I can't wake you up, you wake you up. I can't cure you, you cure you.
So what is it that keeps people from accepting that message?
It's fear of the unknown. The unknown is what it is, and to be frightened of it is what sends everybody scurrying around in circles, chasing dreams, illusions, wars, peace, love, hate, all that. It's all illusion. Unknown is what it is, except that it's unknown. And it's plain sailing. Everything's unknown, then you're ahead of the game. I mean, that's what it is, right?
Do you have a rough picture of the next few years?
I don't know. I couldn't think of the next few years. It's abysmal thinking how many years there are to go. There's millions of them, you know. I just play it by the week. I don't think much ahead of a week.
So what do you eventually want to do, John? Do you want to continue in show business?
Well, first of all, we're not going to fizzle out in half a day. But afterwards, I'm not going to change into some tap-dancing musical. I'll just develop what I'm doing at the moment. Although whatever I say now, I'll change my mind next week. I mean, we all know that bit about it won't be the same when you're 25. I couldn't care less, you know?
I had a message from above, and I'm here to tell you this must have sent me to deliver this to you. Now hear me now, brothers and sisters. God is a concept by which we measure our pain. I'll say it again. God is a concept by which we measure our pain. Yes, we do. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in I-Ching. I don't believe in Bible. I don't believe in tarot. I don't believe in Hitler. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in Kennedy. I don't believe in Buddha. I don't believe in mantra. I don't believe in Gita. I don't believe in yoga. I don't believe in kings. I don't believe in Elvis. I don't believe in Dylan. I don't believe in Beatles. I just believe in me, and that's reality. Yes, it is. Eureka, brother. I had a concept, but Dylan was a name.
Don't give it to me again. But Dylan was a name.
But Dylan